Ah, so that's what was going on. As I looked on at my sister's-in-law's house from afar, the moment I touched the truth, I was speechless. I wonder what kind of intentions my sister's husband and his family had towards her all this time. How many times had they deceived my sister with an impassive face? Unforgivable. No matter what, I'm going to drag you all to hell. My name is Sally. At the age of 45, when I put on my funeral attire for the first time in a while, I realized with dismay that I couldn't zip up the dress at my stomach area. At first glance, I thought I hadn't changed my figure that much from the past, but it's clear that I've been storing visceral fat. The first time I wore this dress was when I was 30. My sister Jane, who had a weak heart since she was a child, sadly passed away at the young age of 27. She had exacerbated pneumonia, and it led to heart failure. Oddly enough, I was the only one who had a conversation with Jane for the last time, as I happened to be visiting her hospital room that day. I'm sure she had a lot of things she wanted to do, as she was only in her second year of marriage. She probably never thought she would leave this world like this. When I remember the smile on Jane's face as she said she wanted to walk under the autumn leaves after she was discharged, it made me feel desolate. On the day of the funeral, when I was unable to accept the tragedy that befell my beloved sister, an incident occurred. It was just before the ceremony began. When I went to the restroom, I saw Jane's husband, Bob, talking on the phone at a nearby lounge. Yeah, once the funeral is over and Christmas time comes around, things should calm down a bit. Yeah, you're right. No, we'd better lie low until Mass for the deceased about a year later. I don't usually eavesdrop on people's phone conversations, but this time I was intrigued by the content. What does he mean, lie low until Mass for the deceased about a year later? Deceased, it means Jane, right? The way Bob speaks, it doesn't feel like a conversation with a coworker. All of my sister's relatives were attending the ceremony. Who could he be talking to? Sorry for making you wait. Yeah, I understand. No, the kid is fine, they don't suspect anything. Neither my wife nor anyone in this family has noticed that I have a child. Just stay at home and relax. What? I was taken aback. Did he just say he has a child? For the record, there are no children between Jane and Bob. Since it was unsure whether Jane's body could withstand childbirth, the two chose not to have children. Both were in their first marriages, and we never heard anything about Bob having a child. What the hell is going on? To be honest, I was just confused by Bob's baffling conversation and my thoughts were in a mess. However, I suddenly remembered the words Jane desperately tried to tell me just before she was taken into the surgery. There's a child at home. After that, Jane lost consciousness and passed away a few days later without ever waking up, so I couldn't hear the rest. I was the only one who heard those words. Until now, the shock of losing Jane was so great that I didn't have the time to think about what those words meant. But when I connected Jane's words about home and what Bob said about stay at home. In the house where they used to live, Sally wouldn't call it parents' house, she'd just call it home. Yet, there are no children in our family home either. Upon a little reflection, a sudden realization hit me. Could it be that the child on the phone with Bob is living at Bob's parents' home? When that thought occurred to me, I couldn't sit still. If that were true, I don't think I could forgive Bob. After paying my respects at Jane's memorial service, I was eager to test my theory. I immediately left the funeral home and headed straight for Bob's parents' house. Bob's parents' house is within walking distance from the house where Jane and her husband lived. Bob, being an only child and his parents aging, had decided to live close by. Jane had concerns about building their house close to her in-laws, worrying if she could get along with the increased family interactions. However, in reality, they rarely returned home and had virtually no family interactions. Perhaps that's why, even at this funeral, Bob's parents didn't seem particularly saddened by Jane's misfortune. If anything, they seemed more interested in playing with their phones, which I found rather disconcerting. Well, I guess that's what it comes to when the in-law relationship is so distant. At a time like this, they could at least pretend to be more sympathetic. Recalling their parents' attitudes, I finally arrived at Bob's parents' house. I was hesitant to ring the doorbell. There shouldn't be anyone in the house. Everyone was supposed to be at Jane's funeral. But what if someone came out? What would I say to that person? I still didn't have any evidence of Bob's infidelity. I wasn't confident in confronting an adversary with my lack of information. While pondering this, I crept around to the back of the house and peeked inside. The window was not closed, and I could see the entire room. Huh? Could someone really be there? Just as my heart skipped a beat.
Hey, stop that! Look, no wriggling! Yeah!
Out into the yard ran a child, chased by an unfamiliar woman. I instinctively hid and watched the two from the shadows. The child looked very much like Bob. His steps were unsteady, probably only a few months since he started walking. The woman appeared to be about the same age as Bob. The features of her eyes were quite similar to the child's, leading me to believe she was undoubtedly the mother. Oh God, did Bob really betray my sister? When did he start his betrayal? When did Jane realize this? Even though the pieces of my suspicions fit neatly together, there were so many other things that I was curious about, and I didn't feel any relief. On the contrary, I even felt tears welling up. I will never forgive him. In place of my sister, I vowed to send that man straight to hell. Afterwards, I was able to return to the funeral home and attend my sister's burial in the churchyard. Although everyone attending the service suspected that I had left in the middle, when I told them that I could not bear the shock of losing Jane, it seemed like they understood. I doubt anyone would think I went to Bob's house, but it was a relief that my sister's in-laws did not suspect anything strange, even in the slightest. The next day, I immediately decided to request a personal investigation on Bob from the only private investigator in town. To my surprise, it was run by Jane's friend, Layla. She had attended the funeral, so I remembered her quite well. And Layla informed me that Jane had also requested an investigation on her husband. After informing her about the investigation, Jane fell ill and passed away. Although I have confidentiality obligations, I believe Jane would have wanted you to know this as she loved you very much, she said. With that, Layla shared the circumstances and results of the investigation that Jane had requested. Once, despite being engaged, Jane and Bob nearly split up. The cause was what you'd call Bob's cold feet. With just half a year left before their wedding, Bob said he had no confidence in his ability to protect Jane, who had a weak heart, and that he wanted some distance. After much deliberation, Jane accepted this request and decided to put some distance between her and Bob. However, in about 2 months, Bob apologized and said that he wanted to marry Jane after all, so everything worked out and they were able to hold the wedding. After that, Bob was working diligently, even on his holidays, because he wanted to give Jane a house in the future. Although it seemed like they didn't have much time together, Jane spoke about it like she was bragging, so I thought, everything must be fine now. But I was wrong. In fact, right after getting engaged to Jane, Bob had started an affair with his childhood friend, Nancy. Bob and Nancy had once dated but broke up due to a small disagreement. After that, he met Jane and got engaged, but he was still hung up on his childhood friend. When Nancy reached out to him, it reignited old feelings. To add insult to injury, it was a lie Bob got cold feet. Around that time, Nancy got pregnant, and Bob was torn about divorcing Jane to marry her. It seemed he had even discussed this with some friends. Nancy was firm in her stand. If you stay with me, I won't ask to get married. But I am going to have this baby. Bob did not want to break up with her, but he also did not want to tell his wife, Jane, that he had a child with another woman. At the same time, he couldn't refuse to acknowledge a child from a woman he loves. He did not want her to have the baby, but she was adamant about keeping it. In the end, Bob confided in his parents about this, only for them to suggest, "This will be our first grandchild, so let her have the baby." Bob's parents had always advocated for his marriage to Nancy, whom they knew well from their childhood. Moreover, they seemed to dislike Jane because she was frail and might not provide them with a grandchild, as they had often complained about this to others. Fortunately, Jane is frail and she won't last long. Once she's gone, acknowledge the child and marry Nancy. They proposed. Nancy was all for this. Although it was a twisted plan, it was appealing to Bob. If his parents say so, then it must be all right, and with that, it was decided that Nancy would have the child. Nancy, like Bob, was an only child and her parents were already deceased. Therefore, Bob's parents were always over at Nancy's house, taking care of her throughout her pregnancy. The narrative of Bob working hard for Jane immediately after their marriage was also a lie. He was probably visiting his newborn baby during that time. There were eyewitness accounts of Bob frequently visiting Nancy's house. From this, it's likely that the excuse of moving because they were worried about their elderly parents was a lie, and they actually wanted to be closer to the child. As the child grew, they respected the in-laws' desire to see their grandchild grow more closely, and it seems that Nancy and the child spent more time at in-laws' house. So, by coming up with various reasons and keeping my sister away from her in-laws, they no longer returned home. It's infuriating that they are promoting infidelity as a family. It was just a month ago when my sister noticed Bob's infidelity. My sister, who was feeling ill, had left work early and was sleeping at home. Probably unaware that Jane was home, Bob, who rarely texted or called when Jane was around, came home a bit earlier than usual that day and apparently made a call somewhere.
I got off work early. Can I come over now? My wife? She's at work, I don't think she'll find out. She seems to be getting sick a lot lately and might go to sleep early. If I say I'm working late, I think I can stay longer with you. Yeah, I also want to live with Nancy and the kids soon. Every time she says she's not feeling well, I think she won't last much longer. Yay! I'm looking forward to it every time.
Just imagining how Jane felt hearing that from her sickbed makes my heart ache. This incident made Jane aware of Bob's infidelities, and she seemed to have enlisted the help of a private investigator run by her friend, Layla. The results of the investigation came out, and just when she was about to confront him with a divorce, she collapsed and passed away. When Layla finished telling me all this, she lowered her gaze and said, "Jane must have been heartbroken." I couldn't agree more. I want to avenge Jane's resentment. I couldn't stand the thought of Bob and his parents getting a grandchild and Bob remarrying. But I've just become aware of everything, and I don't know what to do. After some thought, I had an idea. "Layla, are you good with computers?" At my words, Layla smiled and said, "Leave it to me." The next day, I headed to my sister's-in-law's home. When I rang the doorbell, my sister's mother-in-law appeared on the monitor, surprised at my appearance.
"Oh, Sally! What's going on?"
she asked with a somewhat heightened voice. "I have something to discuss with the family about Jane's belongings. Do you have a moment?" Hearing my words, my sister's mother-in-law went silent and the intercom went off. Uh-oh, maybe she won't let me in? Feeling a bit anxious, I waited a while, and then Bob appeared, saying, "I'm sorry, Sally. The room was a mess, so I had to clean it up a bit. Please come in." "Oh, Bob, you're here. Perfect timing." At my smile, Bob's expression stiffened. He thinks I haven't noticed his infidelity, yet his face stiffens probably because he has something to hide. In fact, I had just seen the figure of his mistress and their child from the window. I bet they were the ones he was cleaning up. I wonder which room they are in. Bob and my sister's in-laws seem to be uneasy as they watch me, who they've allowed into the room. As soon as I took a sip of the tea they served me, as if he had read the situation, Bob asked, "What's this about Jane's belongings?" Yeah. It's about this." Saying so, I laid out a photograph on the table. Bob and his parents were frozen on the spot as they looked at the photo. "Bob? Who is this woman?"
What? No, I don't know her.
In the photo, Bob and a woman were in bed together. "The other day, this was sent to our house. It's said that Bob is having an affair." At my words, his parents glared at Bob, and Bob frantically shook his head.
"Wait! I don't remember this photo!"
shouted Bob. As I watched him, I laid out more photographs. In each photo, Bob and a woman were seen kissing or on a date at a nearby amusement park.
People who cheat don't admit to their memory lapses, do they?
I mused, to which my sister's mother-in-law sharply retorted.
"What are you implying, young lady?" "No, you've got it all wrong, Mom. I don't know anything about this."
"Stop lying. Then what's this picture about? Even though you have a child with Nancy." "A child?" I reacted immediately to my sister's mother-in-law's words. My sister's father-in-law opened his mouth guiltily, uttering, "Oh. Do you mean this child? And is this woman Nancy?" With that, I presented a photograph of Bob holding a child.
"What?"
The entire in-law family lost their words, and although Bob continued to deny the accusation, my sister's mother-in-law slapped him, calling him
"A worthless son. Do you have other children too? Listen to me, please, Mom. Dad."
However, My sisters-in-laws ignored Bob's pleas, repeatedly berating him for betraying their beloved grandchild.
What the hell? Bringing this nonsense here.
The picture was sent to our house. I don't know much about it either. I came here to ask for clarification, but it seems Bob does have a child. I braced myself for a confrontation, and Bob was lost for words. But honestly, Bob was right. Bob has no other affair besides Nancy. I don't intend to tell them this as I don't want to be accused of defamation later on, but this picture is a composite one that I had Layla make. I could have used a real picture of the child with the actual person Bob cheated with, but I chose a composite photo due to certain considerations. I planned to corner him by pressing him about the child, but it was fortunate that my sister's mother-in-law blurted out the truth sooner than I expected. So, your silence means it's true, right? Earlier, your mother also mentioned something about a child and Nancy? Following Bob, my sisters-in-laws also froze in their place. The note that came with the picture said these children are being taken care of in this house. That's not true. My sister's mother-in-law quickly denied my statement. Are you sure? Of course it's not true. Then show me all the rooms.
Huh?
Without waiting for their approval, I stood up from my seat and headed towards the room next door.
Hey, wait a minute. You can't just snoop around other people's houses.
Bob raised his voice.
If there's nothing to hide, then you should show me. Don't worry, I don't mind a bit of mess. That's not the point.
Then what's the issue? Well, without waiting for Bob's answer, I shook off my sisters-in-law's attempts to stop me and peeked into the next room. She's not here, then. Deciding so, I ascended to the second floor. Although I was considerably impeded and scraped my knee, this was nothing compared to my sister's pain. I would endure any number of fresh wounds. Brushing off my sisters-in-laws, I opened the door to the room on the second floor, kicking aside Bob as I did so. Ah. She was there. In the room, Nancy and a child were sitting on the bed. Well now, who do we have here? A different woman and child from the ones in the picture. What's going on?
It's,
At my words, Bob turned pale and Nancy gave me a puzzled look saying, a picture? Yes, it seems like Bob here has been cheating while my sister was around. Look at this picture. As I showed the doctored photo to Nancy, her face distorted in anger and she crumpled the picture.
What the hell is this? You had another woman? Why, that's not it, Nancy. Listen.
Nancy was furious and Bob was pale. Having received satisfactory testimony, I chimed in saying, so, you were indeed another woman involved with Bob, huh? My sister's mother and father-in-law were speechless, holding their heads at this chaotic scene.
Why? You told me I was the one, said we didn't have to get married, and I wanted to have a child and be with you. You had another.
Nancy, this is probably a misunderstanding.
A look-alike or Photoshop. What do you mean probably? You can't absolutely deny it. I can't trust you anymore.
For a moment, I was taken aback at the mention of Photoshop, but since Bob was too flustered to deny it properly, Nancy's suspicions were at an all-time high. A man who's as indecisive as this one, you'd be better off not trusting him. After all, he ruined my sister's life. At my grave advice, Nancy's face stiffened. She too had her life turned upside down by this, but she likely understands that, given her expression. I don't need to tell her anything. Now, I need to act like I'm on Nancy's side and get her to listen to me. For my goal of not letting any of Bob's family, nor Nancy be happy.
I see.
Nancy muttered.
Wait, Nancy! I'm serious about you.
I interrupted Bob's desperate attempt to woo Nancy. So, you weren't serious about my sister, but you told her you were, even made marriage vows to her? Looks like you really are an untrustworthy man, Bob. At my words, Nancy's face darkened. With the doctored photo and all, she seemed to start doubting whether his words were sincere. Good. If you were serious, you wouldn't be two-timing from the start. No matter the reasons, you'd stick to one person. As I emphasized my point, Nancy's face grew even darker. Bob's face was as pale as a ghost. He must have sensed the growing distance in Nancy's feelings. We should break up, Bob. I don't want to be your convenient woman. No matter what you say, after seeing that photo, I can't trust you anymore. I could tolerate being the second woman, but I just can't bear the idea of becoming the third one. As tears streamed down Nancy's face, Bob reflexively reached for her hand and shouted,
"Please, hear me out."
But Nancy shook off Bob's grasp, declaring,
"I don't need you to acknowledge the child anymore, just leave me alone,"
as she walked out of the house with her child. While Bob's entire family was despondent from losing both the child and the planned second wife, I was inwardly pumping my fist. Later, I made Bob write a legal document ending our family relations, cutting all ties with our family. The inheritance left by my sister, which rights would have been Bob's, was also successfully made to be relinquished by him. My rather stern father, having heard everything from me, roared into my sister's in-laws' home. My sister's in-laws were completely taken aback and seemed to have persuaded him to renounce the inheritance, wanting no more to do with our family. Well, even though we call it my sister's inheritance, it was a trifling amount, but it was good that not even a single cent of my sister's assets went to him. On the day I took the photos to Bob's house, it seems one of the windows was left open. Consequently, our commotion and conversation could be heard clearly outside. Along with that and revelations from Nancy's friend who lived nearby, everything that transpired in Bob's house was laid bare to the whole neighborhood. As a result, Bob's house was rumored to be cursed, and Bob quit his job and fled from our town with his parents. Meanwhile, Nancy showed up at our family home out of the blue after about 2 months. She arrived with $50,000 in hand to apologize and thank me for helping her see the truth, and she wanted to make amends for how she had treated my sister. I should have considered Nancy's feelings, but money can't heal the pain my sister endured. It didn't seem right for us to forgive something the person themselves couldn't forgive just because we were given money. I understood her gratitude, but we did not want any money from someone who had done such a disgraceful thing. So I refused to accept anything. Instead, we insisted that the money be donated to a nearby children's home where my sister used to work. Huh? Do you question whether such a woman would actually donate? Of course, I accompanied her to make sure the donation was made properly, so you can rest assured. If the money is used this way, I'm sure my sister would be pleased. I hope the children with a future ahead of them can find happiness, also on my sister's behalf. As for me, it's embarrassing to admit, but I suffered from the loss of my sister for a while, even falling into mental illness. There was a period when it got so bad I even quit my job, but I've gradually recovered and am now working in Layla's detective agency. Layla and I became very close after that incident. I think it's because we were comrades who had lost something important in such a way, we found something in common. Although I didn't have a positive image of marriage due to what happened to my sister, after being with my partner for 4 years, we got married last year. The experience of losing my sister in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic made me realize that I never know when I will not be able to be by the side of my loved ones, so I decided to get married. I want to spend every moment with those I care for, no room for regrets. Just watch me, Jane. I promise to live a long, full life for the both of us. When I get to where you are, I'll share all the fun. With that, I will live vibrantly to the max, yeah.